Well, thank you all for having us. My name is Josh Fain. I'm the Director of Forest Carbon at the Climate Trust. I'm going to walk you guys through this Forest Carbon project this evening. I was going to have our Director, Julius Passe, come on and say a few words, and our Senior Analyst, Madeline Montag, but they'll be here in spirit, and I will try to represent the team well. This project has been a kind of a long time in the making. I've been talking to Doug. Is Doug here tonight, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, great. I've been talking to Doug probably for the last year or more, I guess more like a year and a half. And before that, there had been conversations with my predecessor and Julius for quite a while. So we're really excited about this project, and we really hope that it can help the county achieve the goals it wants to for its lands and help support its efforts to engage in responsible forest management and meet all the varied needs of the county. So I'm going to run through a quick introduction of the Climate Trust. Then I'll lay out this project specifically and how the IFM, which is Improved Forest Management sort of projects, kind of work. We'll talk about what the development process is and what the various steps are. Then we'll talk about how we market and sell the offsets, and then what the ongoing management requirements for the county will be. And
Josh,
yes.
Josh, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we do have our meeting starting at 6, so we only have 30 minutes.
Okay, I'll cover all that information in an amazingly fast amount of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam
You can
Chair,
go.
Mike was a stickler about that. As long as we don't start before the time, we're fine. We can start later.
Oh, my mistake. If we run over a little bit, it's okay. Thank you.
Well, I'll try not to go over.
All right.
Anyway, so the Climate Trust, did I skip? No. So the Climate Trust team that I mentioned today, we have a lot of experience in the carbon markets. Our executive director, Julius Passe, certified forester. He's been the director at the Climate Trust for a couple of years now. Prior to that, he was in my position as the director of Forest Carbon. There you can see some of our other qualifications. We have a really bang-up team to work on this project. We have a lot of experience working with the specific protocol that we'll be talking about, and have executed multiple projects in the last few years with this, just to put your minds at ease. The Climate Trust itself was established in 1997 by the Oregon legislature to manage a regulatory offset acquisition program for the utilities. That makes us the oldest carbon market entity in the U.S. We helped write and set up a lot of the protocols that are being used by various projects around the country today. We have been transitioning in the last few years away from just an acquisition program to developing projects and purchasing and selling offset credits for various clients of ours. We specialize in forestry projects, of course, which we're going to talk about today, but we also do grassland and livestock methane projects. To date, we have about 95 projects in our portfolio and have committed about $45 million to financing various carbon projects. Here's just a rundown of a few recent projects we've done. This ACR-IFM stands for American Carbon Registry Improved Forest Management Projects, which we'll be talking about later, is the protocol that we're sort of recommending for the county right now. We've done some recent projects with some municipalities like the Cleveland Metro Parks in Ohio and Hillsborough County in Florida, which are somewhat similar to the Hood River County project. We've also worked on some California compliance projects that you see listed there, which are a little different than the voluntary projects, which brings me to just a quick rundown of the carbon market basics for some of those of you who might not be familiar. Basically, you have a voluntary and compliance market in the US right now for credits. The compliance market is based in California. That's what the California Air Resource Board oversees. Those projects have a 100-year time commitment, and those are for companies and entities in California that are above the cap of 25,000 metric tons of CO2e a year. On the voluntary side, you have multiple registries that are working in the voluntary market. And the role these registries play is a bit of a clearinghouse for carbon projects where they have pre-approved protocols that have been scientifically vetted that basically outline the calculations and the measurements that are required and all the things that are required for a project to do to show its carbon sequestration capabilities and its additionality. And we submit all that paperwork and documentation to the registries. It gets audited by their third-party certified auditors. And then the registries issue tons of CO2e, which are, CO2 equivalents. Each ton has a serial number associated with it where it can be tracked, traded, and all that on the registry's platforms. So that's kind of the role that these registries play. There's three major ones in the voluntary market space: the American Carbon Registry, which we'll be talking about mostly, Vera, and Gold Standard as well. And the credits themselves are based on the concept of additionality, which we'll talk about a bit more, but it's basically the concept that it's CO2e or carbon that's being sequestered above and beyond what is considered business as usual. The voluntary markets have been growing a lot in the past few years. Some of you may have heard, I'm sure you've seen in the media, net zero commitments from large companies growing. This is driving a lot of the demand for voluntary credits, which is currently outstripping the supply by quite a bit. So the protocol that we're focused on here and for Hood River County is improved forest management protocol through the American Carbon Registry. And at its core, there's a lot to it, but at its core, that protocol requires a commitment to maintain or increase carbon stocks over the 40-year project period. The 40 years are split into two 20-year periods. The first being a crediting period, and that's when the project is issuing credits as it's sequestering and storing carbon. The second 20-year period is a monitoring period where Hood River County will be required to maintain whatever carbon stocks it has sold in the form of offsets. And we'll talk about that some more later in the presentation as well. We have to do quite a bit of data gathering on the forest to submit to the registries to execute these projects. We'll do an inventory at the beginning of the project, and then every 5 years after that, we'll do a refresh inventory to make sure our models and everything are correct and that the data is really accurate. And then every year we have to submit monitoring reports, which are basically just documenting harvest volumes and all that sort of thing that we can keep track of the carbon flows on the land. I'm going to have some time later for questions, but I'm thinking that I'm sure you have lots of questions now, but I think I might cover some of them later. So I'll just wait until a bit later for questions, if that's okay with you guys. So some carbon accounting basics, just so you can kind of understand how this works at sort of a basic level. The whole concept of additionality is built around basically two scenarios that we put together based on the specific forest data and the modeling that we do. The first one is a baseline scenario that basically looks at what the carbon flow on Hood River County forest would look like if the county were purely managing to optimize financial returns. And that is like if the county were concerned with nothing but optimizing net present value of the timber that's on the land currently, what that would look like in terms of harvesting volumes and what that would equate to in terms of carbon loss, basically. So we build that scenario, and then we build the project scenario, which is the actual forest management that the county is willing to commit to during the project. And basically the difference between those two scenarios, which we'll see on a graph here in a minute, is what's considered additional. And then we also have to factor in leakage, which is, we don't need to go into in detail, but it's basically accounting for harvest pressure being shifted to other places. And then contributions to a risk buffer, which is basically an insurance pool that covers the project in the event of an unintentional reversal, which would be a wildfire or a pest outbreak or something like that, something that causes a lot of mortality in the forest that the county was beyond the county's control. That would be covered by this risk buffer pool. So each project puts a certain percentage of the credits they issue into this pool, and then that pool is used as an insurance pool. So this is where I was going to turn it over to my colleague, Madeline Montag, but I will try to get through these slides as well. The Hood River County, we basically did a feasibility study as part of RFP that the county put out to explore a potential carbon project. I guess that was back in the spring, huh, Doug? Or was that last year? Anyway, we looked at the 34,500 acres of county forest that are mixed age and species class, mostly ponderosa pine, Doug fir, mixed conifer. And we found quite a bit of range in terms of carbon stocking. I know that this map is a bit busy, but it basically is showing areas of dense carbon stocking to light carbon stocking. And you can see the darker green are the areas that are the most dense. You could probably expect to find the oldest forest that have not been harvested in some time in those areas, and younger forest in the more red areas. We found an average of 160 metric tons of CO2e per acre, which is quite good for this region. And most of that carbon is in the merchantable stands, not surprisingly, in the county that are 60 plus years of age. So like I said, we modeled this financially optimal scenario, and then we modeled a few other scenarios as well to see what revenue could potentially look like under a few different sort of scenarios for the county. Now, of course, we realize that the county relies heavily on timber revenue, so we're not assuming that the county is going to stop all harvesting, and that is not part of what we're trying to promote or anything like that. We just wanted to show on here sort of the carbon stocks if there was no harvesting going on in the project, just to compare with these others. The gray line that you see kind of going down dramatically and then zigzagging is that baseline harvest scenario that I was talking about, where if the county were just trying to optimize revenues, that's sort of what the carbon flow would look like. You would have a lot of harvesting in the first 5 or so years. Then you would have some regrowth and more harvesting, and then some regrowth. There is what that line represents. What we looked at, I believe we looked at 8 million board feet a year harvest and 9.5 million board feet a year harvest, which I believe is close to the 9.5, I believe is around what the county is currently harvesting. So what we found from that analysis with the 9.5 was that the project would issue about 400,000 credits in years 1 through 5, and that then that credit issuance would drop off dramatically, and the project would not issue very many credits at all in the latter years. And basically the concept here is after the modeled harvest, which are reduction credits, you can get continued credits throughout the project as the trees grow and sequester more carbon. But if the county wants to harvest most of that growth, then it will not be able to issue further carbon credits down the road. So basically the county would be getting credited for its good timber management practices up to this point and how much carbon it has on the landscape that's above the regional average and sort of the industrial, economically incentivized legal average. And then it would sort of diminish out the credit issuance over time. And of course, this is just an estimate. That's what that disclaimer is. Just to make sure you guys know this is an estimate. We would have to actually go out and do an inventory, gather data to get the real number and do the whole project development process. But we do feel pretty good about these estimates, given that the county has excellent data on its forests, and we were able to use some of those. So we estimate that at 9.5 million board feet a year harvest, the project would issue about 1.5 million offsets over the 20-year crediting period. That would go up a little bit. We just have on here just to sort of give you an idea of how much it varies depending on the harvest level. You'd get an additional 140,000 credits if you lowered the harvest level to 8 million board feet a year. We're not trying to push any particular management on the county. We realize the county has to do what it has to do in terms of timber management. We just put that on there to demonstrate what that might look like. So yeah, now maybe is a good time to stop and maybe answer any questions about that slew of information I just sent you before we go into the project development process.
Do you have a question?
I do. Could you remind me which of these scenarios matches the assumptions that are built into our current forest plan?
I think 9.5 million board feet is what I understand the county to be harvesting around right now. Doug could probably, I don't think I can hear Doug, but he could probably.
Shaking his hand, yes, and gave a thumbs up.
Yeah.
So basically, if we lock in for the next 40 years, our current practices, your estimate is that we would achieve about $1.5 million in credits over the next couple of years.
That's 1.5 million offsets. So each of those offsets could be worth $10 to $20 at current market prices. We're seeing around $15 right now. Last year it was as high as 20. The price fluctuates a good bit. So that's significantly more dollars than that.
And that was my next question, which is I thought that you talked in much bigger numbers last time we heard from you, and now I understand the difference.
I didn't, we're hesitant to put the dollar amounts on there because it varies with the market, obviously, but yeah, 1.5 million credits, not dollars.
Right. So your role in this, so you are a not-for-profit company, and you are contracted by us to do the inventory and to create the plan and then to sell these credits on the market. Is that kind of what your role is, or how does that work?
Correct. Yeah, we handle everything soup to nuts in the development process. We set up the project, do the inventory, do all the modeling, submit all the paperwork to the registries, do the audit, bring the auditors out, do all that, and then market and sell those credits through the registry, and then provide that revenue to the county. And we get paid on a net revenue share basis. So we're incentivized to, sell those at the best price possible. And then we get a small portion of the net revenue from the county.
Does anybody else have a question?
And we have more, there'll be more on the marketing and selling of the credits here in a minute.
Go ahead.
Okay. Pressing on. Project development, it is quite a process. We start off doing inventory, a pretty rigorous inventory of the county's forest lands. Unfortunately, we can't use a lot of the good data that the county has because we have to gather very specific data for these projects. We'll put in permanent plots or plots that will at least last for the life of the project, and we'll remeasure those every 5 years. We will do quite a bit of modeling to come up with those scenarios that I mentioned. This modeling will account for the county's forest management plan. It will account for any regulations that are in place, state laws, etc. And we will come up with the carbon stocking calculation, and of course submit all that with some other documentation to the registry. All of this goes through third-party verification or audit. We have accredited verifiers come out. They look at all of our They visit some of our plots, make sure we measure those correctly, look over all of our calculations, make sure it's all to code. And then we submit all that to the registry. And then the registry approves it and issues the credits. That whole process can take anywhere from 12 to 16, 18 months, depending on backlog of projects at the registry. Could be done potentially a little faster, but it generally takes about a year, I would say. Yes, so the way the Climate Trust operates is we usually partner with our landowner partners for the first 10 years of the project. So the contract we've proposed to the county is a 10-year contract. So we would handle for this project, we would handle all of the credit issuances, first full verification, the first few annual monitoring reports and issuances and audits and all that. And then in year 11, we would transfer that management to Hood River County. And we'll, of course, help set up the team there to be equipped to do that. The process won't be that intense after year 10 because the project, like I said, if Hood River County continues to harvest most of its growth, there won't be any credits being issued after that year 10. So it will be relatively light lift, I would say, to continue to manage this project after year 10. Mostly just submitting annual attestation reports that will show how much the county was harvesting. And then the marketing and sales of the credits. This is something that I think the Climate Trust really excels in, and where we really benefit from our experience in the market and having been around for a long time. We have an extensive network of longstanding buyer relationships. Climate Trust is a really respected entity when it comes to producing and putting out high quality offsets like the ones that would come from a project like Hood River County's. We take a multi-pronged strategy in that we do a lot of spot sales, that is sales as the credits are issued, but we try to back those up with some forward sales where we might sell a base amount of the credits prior to issuance. We might pre-sell several years of those just to lock in a price and make sure, hedge against the market, really going down, and then try to capture the upside through selling a volume of them as on the spot to capture any sort of upside of the market. We tailor the narratives to the different buyers. We have different buyers that like different types of projects. We have a lot of buyers in the Northwest that will be very excited, I think, about this project specifically. So I'm very optimistic that we could get a pretty optimal price for these credits. And then once we have the contract signed and we start to develop the project, we'll start going out and looking for those anchor buyers that might want to prepay for some of these credits so that we have some of those sales locked in and have some of that price locked in. The key drivers right now in the voluntary market, the things that are really driving price and demand, are project integrity, geography. Obviously, location is important to people that are buying these credits. Excuse me. The charisma, that is like, what are the co-benefits of the project? And we always list all the co-environmental benefits, whether it be water quality, recreation, or any of the other UN SDG Sustainable Development Goals. And there's some other things on there that you see listed as key elements for these voluntary projects. Like I said, this project being rather high profile and being in River County, where lots of people recreate and love the land, we really think this will be a dynamite project and be under high demand from buyers. I mentioned the project timeline before, so I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but suffice to say that the whole process does take a while, and it takes, like I said, maybe a year to 16 months, maybe even 18 months to work through the initial whole process and get the credits issued. After the initial issuance and sale of the credits, it's not that intense every time. We'll be, putting together these reports to submit annually to the registries, and then those credits will get issued each year. After that, for the first 4 or 5 years, as I said, and then it kind of depends on how much harvesting that the county is doing. So again, why the Climate Trust? You guys, well, the commissioners always already selected us. We had this slide in here, but I mean, we really are the best option in the Northwest, especially we're the oldest entity in the market. We're very experienced in developing these types of projects. Specifically, we're based in Oregon. We have nonprofit transparency, and we have a history of working with public entities like yourselves. And that's it. There's our email addresses that you can contact us at, and I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can now in the time that we have left.
Do we have more questions? Yes. Thank you.
Josh, can we go back to the timeline?
Yes.
So the initial project development, I'm sorry, you may have said it and I might have missed it. Are those first 3 steps, are those concurrent or are those sequential?
Some of those are concurrent. But that is the bulk of what takes the first year, is those 3 things. So some of that'll happen.
Initial project
but
development.
that 3-step process will likely take 8 to 12 months.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? You have a question? Let's have Ed's got a question.
What if I have 2?
Oh, that's good.
So, I have 2 questions, and I know just about enough about this to know absolutely nothing. So I'm gonna ask what may sound like a dumb question. Who are the buyers?
Buyers are companies that are looking to offset. So most companies now have these like net zero commitments, right? They're trying to reduce their CO2 emissions, but they're also trying to offset what they can't reduce. So we work with companies that are making incredible efforts to reduce their emissions, but then also purchase offsets to cover what they can't reduce. In terms of specific buyers, I'm not sure that I can say right now who our specific buyers are.
No, I wasn't looking for specific.
Okay.
Just in general terms. So, and you actually said that earlier, so I apologize for not connecting the dots. Secondly, I think I heard in terms of cost to the county, that you take a percentage of the monetary value of those credits. So if the price of credits were to decline dramatically, that would affect both the county and you as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we set it up that way so that our incentives are aligned.
Sure.
And to get you guys the best price we possibly can.
That's all I had.
So a few questions. First of all, you talked about the process of sales. The credits would be sold over a period of years, basically the first 5 years. So the price is at the time of sale, correct? There's not, or is there a process of people buying options for sales down the road at an agreed upon price, or when will we know how successful this has been? I guess is where I'm asking it.
Yeah, and this is where I wish Julius could have gotten on, because he's sort of the guy with the strategy behind this. But I think our strategy has been to try to pre-sell about 1/3 of the credits. And if we can find an anchor buyer to buy 1/3 of the credits for those first 4 or 5 years, and we can negotiate a good price, what we feel like is a good sort of anchor price for that, we usually will do that so that we've locked in, so that we know at least a third of those are getting a good price, albeit maybe not a premium price, a little lower than premium maybe, but we have that price locked in. So that we're hedging against the market going down in that way, right? So, and then we would sell the others as the other 2/3 as it's issued as what we call a spot sale.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Yeah. And if Julie says anything else to add, you could send us something in writing or let us know if there's anything else that would be helpful on that. But I think I have a general understanding of the fact that there's a little bit of, there's knowledge and finesse in how you do it, and you have some strategies which you may which may change in time.
Yeah, and in terms of when you'll know, like we'll do the inventory, and then once we do the modeling work and we get down that road a ways, we'll have a good idea of how many credits the project is going to have. And then while all that's being verified and audited and stuff, we'll start to sort of feel out buyers. And so we should have, hopefully we would have an anchor buyer in that first year signed up, so that the county should know within the first year or two, I would say at the most, if we can secure that anchor buyer, what that revenue looks like. And then, the rest of it will be sort of as the market goes. We're very optimistic about the direction of the market, by the way. I mean, demand keeps going up. So, prices have been steadily rising. And so we're pretty optimistic that, this project will do well and be able to get a good price for the credits.
So that gets right into my question number 2, which is, I understand demand has been increasing, but at the same time, there's been some bad press about the general concept of carbon credits. And I'm wondering if you are foreseeing either any effect of that, either on price or on the regulatory environment. Is there anything we should be watching? Is there any reason to rush this or to slow it down based on those 2 factors?
That's a good question. There has been some negative press. I mean, most of it I feel like most of the criticism doesn't actually understand how these projects work exactly and how much rigor goes into quantifying the additionality of these projects. And I don't see the criticism that's been leveled at offset projects as threatening the integrity of the market. I think you have a few articles coming out criticizing, but at the same time, you have the biggest companies in the world pledging millions and millions of dollars towards these efforts. So I don't see it really eroding demand right now. I think the registries have responded by tightening up some of their protocols, and they've responded to some of the criticism and have changed a few of the rules. And I think that will probably continue. I think the rules will continue to get more rigorous, and we'll continue to dial in sort of like how we calculate this additionality piece, because it is a little tricky. But overall, I think these projects are undeniably great, I think, for conservation. They're locking in forests for future generations that are otherwise not legally or economically protected. And so I think there's a real easy argument to make that these projects are having a profoundly positive environmental impact. And there's a lot of people out there, including ourselves, making that argument. And I think the facts are in our favor, I guess, is what I would say. So I don't see the recent criticism as being an existential threat to these markets.
Great. And then question number 3, you used the term charisma, and that sort of caught my attention. And I'm presuming that you're talking about charisma of our forest as opposed to our forester or our board of commissioners, correct?
Well, I'm sure y'all's charisma would help too, but
so
yeah, no, I mean, it's a very charismatic project, right? I mean, it's a forest that a lot of people are familiar with and recreate on, and
Right.
provides the county with a lot of revenue. It's a great example of a multi-use forest. And I think I really think that this kind of project is kind of what these protocols were set up for, and to lock in, in legal terms, the kind of really stellar forest management that Doug and the crew there have been doing for years, and like having that insured and then having that valued monetarily and in terms of carbon, I think is just a big win for conservation, for good forest management, and for the county in general.
So really my question in that regard, though, is we kicked off about 2 years ago now. We made a request for some updating of our forest plan, especially with regard to discussion of recreation values and perhaps habitat values of the forest. Do you see those? Do you see the forest plan itself as one of the sales tools, and would our updating of the forest plan be helpful in the marketing of these credits?
Yes, I guess yes, as a short answer to both those questions. The forest plan and the way the county manages the forest will definitely be a great asset to us in marketing these credits. And what was the second part of the question again?
Well, it's the specificity of the forest plan itself as to whether the move that we have now to update some of the language or address some of the issues that haven't been addressed in the past, to more clearly address those issues in the forest plan, if that's beneficial to the marketability of this project.
Yes, in general, I think yes. And Doug and I have talked about this. I mean, the plan and the carbon project need to be in sync, obviously. But yes, in general, I think that will be a great asset to this project.
Can I ask a follow-up on what you just said? So basically, if we become more restrictive, or we tighten up use, look at environmental concerns and tighten things up, set something aside for a particular purpose long term, that's only going to benefit us. What we can't do is go the other direction and loosen and allow harvesting in areas at an earlier time, or going into areas that we hadn't previously. Is that correct? As long as we're moving in a direction of more conservation, then that's only going to help us. If we go the other direction, that would not be acceptable, correct?
I'm trying to think of how to answer that. So going back to what I said about the basic commitment of this protocol, which is to maintain or increase carbon stocks across the forest, across the project period.
Yep.
So
yeah, okay.
It's about the carbon stocks of the whole forest,
yep,
over time. So it's not necessarily about a specific group of trees or a specific acreage or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I'm saying if we decide that we want to set aside a certain area and we take it out of rotation so that the trees are there and we're not harvesting in that area, that's not going to hurt us. That's probably
that would help the project in terms of carbon.
So related to that, if we take the proceeds of this and acquire more forests, which we bring under the same management plan, would we be able to sell, presumably we'd be able to sell additional credits based on that, correct? This project is defined by the current forest, and any additions to the forest would not be governed by this plan, but would be a future opportunity. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we would have to add those acres to this project or do another project in the future or whatever. But yeah, any acres the county acquires after this, or acres the county, any acres the county acquires after this would not be subject to this project.
So
we could
previous
keep
discussion
going.
And your previous discussion about this is that the goal here is not to get a quick flush of cash to buy some pretty things for ourselves. It's to improve the county's overall future revenue generation. So, and one of the things that was discussed was
Buying more
forests is
right.
probably the thing we know best how to do, but we may find another thing that we want to do. But that's the general philosophy there.
That sounds like Are there any more comments or questions?
Yeah, I guess I would agree that it's nice to think about how we're going to diversify our revenue. Just wondering about any potential unintended consequences while we're under contract with you for the first 10 years and maybe after we're out of contract.
I'm sorry, any possible what?
Just unintended consequences, anything you've seen come up in similar areas?
I can't, I mean, I'm not trying to be too optimistic here, but I can't really think of any. I mean, if there's a fire or something like that, we have to come out and measure, you know, how much volume was lost and report on that. And then, you know, the buffer kicks in. So there's, you know, there could be some additional expenses. Those would be covered, you know, by the revenue of the project. Hopefully, I mean, there could be unforeseen expenses, I guess, if there's a fire on the project, you know, in the latter years that's we haven't factored into our revenue projections here, but that's the only thing that's coming to mind right now.
Okay, thank you.
So that would mean that we would want to, you would recommend that we would keep a reserve to address. You wouldn't spend all your money, you would keep some money aside to
to
address some
protect.
additional expenses.
Yeah, and there will be expenses associated with monitoring the project, and we've laid all those out in a much more in-depth spreadsheet that we've shared with the forestry team there. There are expenses in the latter years, but yeah, we sort of factor those into the net revenue, and yeah, generally recommend that people set aside enough money in the beginning to cover those expenses.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else from you guys? No?
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation.
Yeah, no problem. I love Hood River. It's one of my favorite places, and it's nice to be here, meet you guys tonight. And I really hope that this moves forward and it can be a great thing for the county.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank y'all. Let me stop sharing here. And I will take off. See y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Sure, can I ask a quick question of staff?
Certainly.
How did we, sorry, how did, I see here that we selected from 2 proposals. How did we go about seeking out proposals, and how did you come to the decision-making process? And sorry if you're being repetitive again, meeting number 1.
I don't think we quite went into all that tonight. Kind of glazed over it since the first meeting. I think we covered it maybe a little bit more, but a little over a year and a half ago, we started working on pulling together an RFP. And then it was about a year ago where we accepted proposals. We sent it out to, remember the exact number, but I want to say it was at least 8 different companies that deal in carbon. We knew that probably not all of them would submit. Some of them are more tailored to certain size ownerships and types of ownerships and things like that. But we did get 2 that we felt were both realistic proposals that we could follow up on. The Climate Trust is one, and we had one other, Blue Source was another. And you know, some of the so I had a team, 1 Forest Advisory Committee member on our group, as well as myself and Jeff Hexel, reviewed those proposals, as well as forestry staff, looked them over, came up with, definitely kicked some things around a little bit. But really at the end of the day, really felt like Climate Trust was more advantageous to the county in terms of the timing of when we would see the revenue. That was a key factor actually between the 2 proposals. This one was early, pretty much majority of the revenue was within the first 10 years. And frankly, most of it was in the first 5 or 6 years. And relative to our goals of being able to acquire land, really felt like having the money sooner was better than having it later. Plus trying to project out 10, 20 years in terms of what these projects might look like then versus now. Pretty hard. I mean, they're still changing a bit even today. And so money now is worth something, and we really still feel there's a reasonable chance that we may have opportunities available to us in the near term to acquire land. But it's really hard to do that if you don't have some cash ready. So that was a major factor in terms of, knowing what we may want to do with the money. Was a key factor in which company made more sense long term.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just throw in one more little piece. Companies have been sniffing around for a long time, a number of years. I was approached probably 10 years ago the first time on concepts, and then over time, more and more, and Doug started fielding requests and people wanting information. So it's really exciting to see this finally get to this point. It's been a long time coming.
And what I didn't understand when we first started this discussion is, in a sense, this is a hedge against fire danger, in that there's an insurance plan built into this, where we sell the credits, we still have the money, even if there's a fire. The reserve pool covers that. With the rest of our forests, we have a fire, that's uninsured loss for us.
Yep.
So that's sort of a unexpected benefit to this process.
Yeah, there's unintended benefit.
Unintended benefits. No, that was a good question about unintended. And we had more discussion in the first presentation about the risks associated with it. So I think he's assuming that we all were there for that meeting.
Well, it's really
sounds great.
interesting, and I would rather keep talking about it, but I do think at this point we probably should start on this. So, you guys want to take a short break?